I want to share with you some chilling stories about people who dabbled in the world of spirit summoning, only to regret it instantly. These stories serve as cautionary tales, reminding us of the potential dangers of meddling with forces beyond our understanding. First, let's talk about the case of Roland Doe, also known as Robbie Mannheim. Now, in 1949, this 14-year-old boy from Maryland became the inspiration for William Peter Blatty's widely popular novel, The Exorcist. Roland had been experimenting with a Ouija board, trying to contact spirits when he allegedly became possessed by a malevolent entity. Now, the events that followed were nothing short of terrifying. Roland's family reported strange noises, furniture moving on its own, and unexplained events. The boy himself would go into trances, speaking in a very deep, frightening voice and exhibiting supernatural strength. Now, the Catholic Church eventually intervened, performing a series of exorcisms on Roland. The rituals were said to be so intense that they left the boy shaken and traumatized. In mid-1949, several newspaper articles printed anonymous reports of the alleged possession and exorcism. The source for these reports is thought to be the family's former pastor, Luther Miles Schultz, and according to one account, a total of 48 people witnessed this exorcism. According to author Thomas B. Allen, Father Walter was one of the last surviving eyewitnesses of the events and participated in the exorcism. Allen wrote that a diary kept by attending priest Father Raymond J. Bishop detailed the exorcism performed on Roland Doe. Now, speaking in 2013, Allen emphasized that definitive proof that the boy known only as Robbie was possessed by malevolent spirits is unattainable. Now, according to Allen, Halloran also expressed his skepticism about potential paranormal events before his death. When asked in an interview to make a statement verifying that the boy had actually been demonically possessed, Halloran responded saying, "No, I can't go on record. I never made an absolute statement about the things because I didn't feel I was qualified." This exorcism case inspired the novel, which in turn was adapted into the 1973 horror film of the same title, The Exorcist. The case also inspired the 2000 movie, Possessed, which is said to be closer to the story in Allen's book. A documentary was made of the case titled In the Grip of Evil. While the exact details of the events are still disputed, one thing is very clear. Roland's experimentation with spirit summoning had devastating consequences. Another case that comes to mind is that of the Parins family. In January of 1971, Roger and Carolyn Parin moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Rhode Island with their 5 daughters, only to discover that it was haunted by an evil spirit. It started very small. The family reported, all manners of paranormal activity, from unexplained noises and movements to physical attacks. Carolyn would notice that the broom went missing or seemed to move from one place to the next by itself. She could hear the sound of something scraping against the kettle in the kitchen when no one was even in there. She'd find small piles of dirt in the center of a freshly cleaned kitchen. Their daughters would also say that they would notice spirits around the house and that they seemed angry. As the haunting, intensified, the parents sought the help of paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, the Warrens, who were also involved in the Amityville horror case, believed that the spirit was the ghost of a witch who had been slaughtered on the property. The Warrens attempted to perform a cleansing ritual to rid the house of the malevolent entity, but however, the ritual was said to have awakened the spirit instead, making it even more aggressive. Now, the parents eventually fled the house, unable, of course, to cope with the intense paranormal activity. When the movie, The Conjuring, was released in 2013, it was met with critical acclaim. Critics everywhere praised it for its, all too very realistic portrayal of the demonic haunting of the innocent family in Rhode Island. Most viewers assumed that the movie was, nothing but the wild imagination of director James Wan. However, the true story of The Conjuring is actually rooted in the horrifying true experience of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Ed Warren was a World War II veteran and a former police officer who became a self-professed demonologist after studying the subject on his own. His wife Lorraine claimed to be a clairvoyant and medium who was capable of communicating with, the demons that Ed discovered. And in 1952, 1942, Ed and Lorraine founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, the oldest ghost hunting group in New England. They quickly gained notoriety as respected paranormal investigators after their initial investigation of the Amityville hauntings. Although the movies seem, over-dramatized and impossible to believe, the Warrens maintain that all of the events depicted actually transpired. Though Ed passed away sadly in 2006, Lorraine was a consultant on the film and claims that she didn't let the directors take any more dramatic license than was absolutely necessary. Last on my list to talk about is a well-documented case, is that of LaToya Ammons, now an American woman who, along with her 3 children, experienced a series of terrifying paranormal events after conducting a Ouija board seance in their Gary, Indiana home. Shortly after, she began to experience strange occurrences, including hearing strange noises, seeing shadowy figures, and feeling a very intense, unsettling presence. She said she heard footsteps in the basement and doors opening and closing on their own. Desperate for answers, LaToya turned to a Ouija board, hoping to communicate with whatever entity was responsible for the haunting. She gathered her family and conducted a seance, asking, the spirit to reveal itself. According to LaToya, the entity responded, identifying itself as Zozo, a malicious spirit known for its dark and very sinister nature. LaToya and her family were initially, skeptical, of course, but as, the entity began to manifest itself, they realized they had made a very grave mistake. The entity Zozo began to wreak havoc on the family, causing physical attacks, unexplained noises. The family reported finding strange symbols etched into the walls and experiencing very intense, unexplained cold spots throughout the house. As the haunting intensified, LaToya and her family became convinced that they had summoned a very evil spirit and was determined to destroy them. The family reached out to their doctor on April 19, 2012, when he visited the house during, the supposed haunting. He actually noted that their behavior was just delusional. Someone from his office contacted the police and the children were taken to the hospital. The DCS actually initially believed that the children were just performing for their mother. In other words, making it all up for attention. But that wasn't true, and it's even alleged that her 9-year-old son was seen walking backwards up the wall in the presence of a family case manager as well as a hospital nurse. So once that happened, it really debunked that whole theory that they were making it up. The nurse made a statement that said, he walked up the wall, flipped over, and just stood there. There's no way he could have done that. The police captain named Charles Austin said it was the strangest story he ever heard and admitted that at first he thought the family was making it up in an attempt to just make money. But after several visits to their home and interviews with witnesses, he simply said, "I am a believer." Campbell says she remembers telling her daughter, "We need help. We need to talk to someone who knows how to deal with it." And so desperate for help, they turned to a local paranormal investigator who confirmed that the entity was indeed Zozo, a spirit that's known for its very dark and malevolent nature. Now, the family eventually fled their home, unable to cope, of course, with the intense paranormal activity. LaToya has since spoken publicly about her experiences, warning others of the dangers of using Ouija boards and summoning spirits. In 2024, Netflix released a movie called The Deliverance, which is said to be based on this exact case. The movie begins with a title card that reads, "The following story is inspired by true events." So if this has intrigued you, go give that a watch. And in 2014, a man named Zach Bargains actually purchased the house for $35,000 and demolished it in January of 2016 after filming a documentary in it titled The Demon House, which was released in 2018. So that's another one you can go watch. The case of Kenneth Anger, the Hollywood occultist. Now, Kenneth Anger, an underground filmmaker in 1960s Hollywood, known for his films like Fireworks and Scorpio Rising, as well as his book Hollywood Babylon, was a self-proclaimed occultist, drawing inspiration from Aleister Crowley's Thelema and exploring themes of transgression and the dark side of Hollywood. He was actually quite obsessed with Aleister Aleister Crowley, who infamously called himself the B666. Anger wasn't just a fan, he followed Crowley's rituals, studied his books, and conducted real summoning ceremonies. Now, one of his closest collaborators, Bobby Beausoleil, claimed Anger attempted to summon the demon Lucifer during one of their ritual film shoots in the desert. Things spiraled. Beausoleil would later become part of the Manson family and commit assassinations. Crazy connection, I know. Anger himself descended into a strange madness, reportedly speaking in tongues, destroying his own films, and claiming to be possessed by demonic forces he had invited in. Whether you see it as madness, coincidence, or proof of something darker, Anger's life was never the same after those rituals. Anger's work is celebrated for its artistic vision, its exploration of transgressive themes, and its connection to the history of counterculture and the occult. The Exorcism of Anna Eklund. Now, the girl who invited it in, Anna Eklund, which was actually a pseudonym for Emma Schmidt, was a young American woman in the early 20th century who reportedly became possessed after experimenting with occult practices encouraged by her aunt, who was said to be practicing witchcraft. Now, this is an urban legend. Her 1928 exorcism in Iowa is one of the most thoroughly documented in the Catholic Church history. She alleged, demonic possession and exorcism occurred over several decades, culminating in an extensive exorcism that lasted from August 18th to December 23rd, 1928 in Erling, Iowa. Now, Eklund was said to have exhibited symptoms, akin to possession beginning at age 14 and was 46 years old during her final exorcism by Father Theophilus Resinger, a Roman Catholic priest. Now, witnesses, claimed Anna levitated, spoke languages she had never learned, and exhibited unnatural strength. For 23 days, priests performed rites to banish what they said were multiple demons, including Beelzebub and Judas Iscariot. Now, according to records, Anna had tried to summon a spirit to communicate with her deceased mother. What she got was something else entirely. She survived, but never fully recovered. Her case was cited for decades as a warning against dabbling in summoning or spiritualism. Now, Eklund's case is considered by theology and paranormal scholars to be one of the most abundantly documented cases of possession in the 20th century, including a profile in a 1936 issue of Time magazine. The Charlie Charlie Challenge. In 2015, a viral game called the Charlie Charlie Challenge swept the internet. Teenagers everywhere were placing pencils on paper and calling on Charlie, a supposed Mexican demon or spirit. Now, this game / internet urban legend of sudden and inexplicable popularity surged to the top of the global social media charts after kicking around on the Spanish language internet for much of eternity. Now, as of me even saying this right now, hashtag Charlie Charlie Challenge has been tweeted more than 1.6 million times. More people are Googling Charlie Charlie than virtually any other news event. Now, while it's hard to pin down an exact country of origin, Charlie Charlie has a long history as a schoolyard game in the Spanish-speaking world. Traditionally, this version with the cross pencils was called the Juego de la Lapicera, a term that still turns up lots of creepy stuff on Google, and Charlie Charlie was a distinct game played with colored pencils. At some point in their internet and playground travels, the two games seem to have merged. In either case, both have always had a demonic or supernatural connotations. One site calls La Picera the poor man's Ouija board. Now, most teens trying Charlie Charlie laughed it off as just harmless fun until one incident in the Dominican Republic. A group of students performed the challenge at school. One girl began screaming uncontrollably, claiming she couldn't move her body. Several others fainted or started vomiting. Paramedics were called. Local authorities, declared a temporary school shutdown, saying the children were suffering from mass, hysteria. But priests were brought in as well. A few of the children were never the same after that. Some refused to sleep indoors, claiming something was watching them. One even attempted to take their own life weeks later, saying, "Charlie won't let me go." It was easy to dismiss at first, but the deeper you dig, the more similar reports you find across Latin America during that period. The Demon of Loftess. Now, this is the visitor that never left. The history of Loftess Hall, a large mansion house that's located along the Hook Peninsula, goes back through the centuries. You know, the original hall was built in 1350 by the Redmond family during the time of the Black Death. Now, it was known as Redmond Hall until the 1650s when it was given to English planters, the Loftess family, and from then on was known as Loftess Hall. Now, Loftess Hall is rumored to be, you know, Ireland's most haunted house. The large country house is built on the site where the original Redmond Hall was once located. People believe that the hall was visited by the devil himself, but his presence is not the only one that wanders the halls of this impressive building. You know, in the 18th century in Ireland's Loftess Hall, a noble family received a very mysterious visitor. A storm, you know, brought a well-dressed man to their door. He was polite, very handsome, charming, but one night while playing cards, Lady Anne Tottenham dropped one of her cards on the floor, and when she looked under the table, she saw the man's feet were not human, but hooves. She screamed, of course. You know, he vanished in a flash of fire and smoke. Now, the family believed he was a demon she had accidentally summoned during private, you know, seances that she held out of grief for her passed on lover. Now, Lady Anne was never the same. She became violent, was locked in a room, and she actually passed away in isolation. Now, visitors still say her ghost and the energy of that entity remains. Now, Loftess Hall is considered one of the most haunted places in Europe. You know, the building which stands today was heavily renovated between 1872 and 1879 in preparation for a visit from Her Majesty Queen Victoria. The visit, though, never happened, and the Loftess family were left with huge debt following the major work carried out on the building. The last of the surviving Loftess family passed away back in 1890, and the bankrupt estate was actually put up for sale. In 2011, the house was sold to its current owners, the Quigley family. Now, the family have secured the structure and are, you know, regenerating the walled gardens, the courtyard, and house to ensure the future of the Loftess Halls for the next generations. The Diary of Jake McKinnon, a Reddit ritual that went terribly wrong. In 2018, a Reddit user under the handle MCK_Jake posted a series of updates in the r-no sleep community about a summoning ritual he claimed to be trying. It started off as fiction, or so it seemed. He said he was following a grimoire, you know, that he bought on the dark web, trying to summon a demon named Tyran. The first few posts were funny, but then the tone shifted. He claimed the lights in his apartment would flicker, objects would move on their own, and he just couldn't sleep. In one video, you could see a shadowy figure pass behind him. Now, the final post said, "I messed up. I didn't bind it. I didn't follow the rules. I don't know how to send it back." Jake McKinnon's account went dark after that. A user tried to track him down through IP logs and emails, only to find the address linked to a police report about a man that was found passed away in his apartment surrounded by occult symbols. His face was said to be frozen in a look of terror. Now, to this day, some people claim the entity that he named Tyran has shown up, you know, in other rituals since. Many people debated his story and claims, though, because according to Etruscan mythology, Tyran is a goddess, not a demon. She's the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility, often associated with the Greek goddess Aphrodite. She is frequently depicted as a young winged girl, embodying the grace and allure that, you know, the Etruscans kind of revered. Now, whatever the case is, the story is creepy and concerning, and to this day, no one can seem to get a hold of Jake and know about his whereabouts.
Number 5. The Incubus. One of the more taboo evil demons on this list is the Incubus, the male equivalent to a succubus. While a succubus is known for seducing sleeping men in order to impregnate themselves with ghostly children, the incubus comes into a woman's bed while she is asleep and impregnates her. She then carries the baby to term, giving birth to deformed witches, wizards, or demons. Not all of these offspring become evil, however, with the first legend of a wizard being fathered by an incubus actually being the legendary wizard who served King Arthur during the days of Camelot, Merlin. In the late 1400s, demonology text Malleus Maleficarum by the German Catholic clergyman Heinrich Kramer. The author talks about incubi and states that there are 5 ways to get rid of them: moving the afflicted woman to a different location, exorcism, sacramental confession, the sign of the cross, or excommunication of the attacking entity, which even the book itself admits is basically just another term for exorcism. If we are to believe Kramer's account, then incubi seem to be relatively easy demons to get rid of, being subject to all the usual tricks of the exorcist trade, and being able to be shaken by simply moving. But according to the works of the Franciscan friar Ludovico Maria Sinistari, they are much more difficult to deal with than the typical demon, with him saying that an incubus does not obey exorcists. They have no dread of exorcisms, show no reverence for holy things, and at the approach of which they are not in the least overawed. If this is true, then getting rid of an incubus could be a deeply traumatic and maybe even impossible task. Because we do not know which description of their strengths and weaknesses is the more accurate one, it is probably best to simply avoid any situations or rituals that could result in the summoning of an incubus, no matter how long of a dry spell you are dealing with, or how desperate you are becoming. Number 4. Mephostophles. Mephostophles, or Mephisto to his friends, is a demon who features prominently in German folklore. Although he has since become somewhat of a stock character, he is primarily known for the role he plays in the Faust legend. The Faust legend is inspired by the life of a real alchemist, astrologer, and magician named Johann Georg Faust, who lived in Germany during the late 1400s and early 1500s. It is unclear how closely Faust's life follows the legend it inspired, but the tale of his interactions with Mephostophles have been passed down for centuries after his death. In the folk legend, Faust has become depressed with his life as a scholar and tries to take his own life. When the attempt fails, he calls on the devil, hoping to acquire magical powers that will allow him to indulge in all the earthly pleasures he can imagine. The devil then sends his representative, Mephostophles, to make a deal with Faust. Faust and the demon broker a deal that will make Mephostophles serve Faust with his powers for a set number of years. When that time is up, Mephisto will claim his soul and take Faust to hell, where he will be punished and forced to serve Satan for all of eternity. Faust uses Mephostophles for a variety of purposes over the years, most famously to help him seduce a beautiful young maiden named Gretchen, with whom he has a child. When the child is born, Gretchen realizes the baby's unholy nature and throws the child into the waters, causing her to be arrested and executed for murder. Faust is corrupted and realizes his sins are unforgivable, and he is carried away to hell by Mephostophles. True or not, the Faust legend has become deeply ingrained in culture, and despite the initial benefits Mephostophles may present you with, he is not worth summoning. Number 3. The Popo Bawa. The Popo Bawa is one of the more recent demonic creatures on this list, with its first sightings being in 1965. The Popo Bawa is a Zanzibar legend, whose name literally translates to bat wings. This name is not a description of the creature's actual physical form, but rather a description of the large dark shadow that it casts during its attacks. Sightings of the creature have been reported periodically throughout the years in Zanzibar, with stories from the 70s, 80s, and reaching their peak in 1995, before taking a 5-year hiatus, and then being seen again in 2000 and 2007. One of the most popular explanations for this demonic creature is that a sheik man released a jinn in order to get revenge against his neighbors, but soon lost control of the jinn, who took to demonic ways. The Popo Bawa is described as a shapeshifter who takes many different forms, often switching from humanoid to animalistic shapes. It is known for being accompanied by a sulfuric odor, and it tends to visit homesteads at night and on rare occasions during the day. It is indiscriminate in its choice of victims, going from home to home and attacking all members of the family before engaging in physical attacks, poltergeist behavior, and most feared of all, forced sodomy. It then moves on to the next home in the community. Victims of Popo Bawa attacks are often encouraged to come forward with their story in order to get the community protection, in order to avoid repeat visits from the demonic creature. The creature apparently becomes enraged if their existence is denied, and during one incident in 1971 possessed a young girl who then spoke to a group of villagers in a deep man's voice to confirm its existence. If the Popo Bawa really does exist and attacks the people of Zanzibar, then he should obviously be avoided at all costs, as his style of attack would be not only painful and humiliating, but could have long-term effects on the sanity of his victims if he chose to return to make his attacks a consistent issue. This is one demonic force that there is no benefit to tangling with, and should be avoided as much as possible, for both your own sake and that of everyone in your community. Number 2. Any of the demons in the Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is a grimoire compiled in the 17th century from materials that were already centuries old at the time of the book's original publication. The volume is divided into 5 books, and one of which contains instructions on how to grant the practicing magician an eidetic memory and the ability to instantly learn materials. Another of the books teaches the user how to contact angels using a wax tablet and a method known as scrying. 2 of the other books describe the 24 different angels and their relation to the 24 hours in the day, and the 360 spirits of the degrees of the zodiac. However, the Lesser Key's most famous book is known as Ars Godia, which contains 72 sigils, each representing a different demon, as well as instructions on how to summon the 72 demons and even how to control them. Before you go searching for a copy at Barnes & Noble, consider the following. The Lesser Key of Solomon is apparently a cursed book, with anyone who owns a copy of it reportedly being subject to constant bad luck, or in some cases even death. Some owners of the book have reported seeing the pages turning by themselves and even flying across the room, while hearing whispers and seeing dark shadow people. If this warning has reached you too late and you have already fallen victim to this horrible curse, the good news is that it can apparently be broken by burning all the pages and disposing of the ashes. No one knows for sure who wrote the Lesser Key of Solomon. Some of course believe that it was written by King Solomon himself as a gift for his son, but others believe that it was actually dictated by some of the 72 demons in order to give themselves a means of crossing over to our world. Whoever actually wrote it, I hope that it was done with the purpose of helping us control the dark forces that are knocking on the door of reality, and not the other way around. As there is no way to know for sure who is responsible for this demonic grimoire, the smart move would probably be to avoid the book and avoid using it, and summoning forces beyond your understanding or control, who wish to claim your soul for their own. Number 1. Master Leonard. Who would have thought that someone named Leonard could be frightening, and yet here we are. Leonard is one of the spirits or demons featured in the 1818 demonology text, the Dictionnaire Infernal, by Jacques Collin, which describes various demons as well as their hierarchies. Leonard is described as a 3-horned goat with the face of a man who uses his horns to initiate his followers and grant them satanic powers. His job title is Grand Master of the Nocturnal Orgies of Demons, which is undeniably an impressive job title. He is known for having banquets thrown in his honor by his followers, where they all consume the flesh of a stillborn goat, which is then eaten without salt and boiled with reptiles in order to depurify the sinless meat. He also has a habit of transforming into a handsome young soldier and luring young women into the wilderness, where he will impregnate them, with all the resulting children being stillborn as an offering to sin. Male followers of Leonard are granted the ability to transform into monstrous animals, or even into the incubi, which we already detailed. What makes Leonard so frightening isn't just his ability to corrupt people, but the idea that his actions directly lead to more demonic creatures that we are unable to effectively fight being created. In order to keep our world as demon-free as possible, Master Leonard and his parties should probably be avoided, no matter how fun some parts of them might seem. With that, another one of our journeys together is complete. I hope that you have come away from this with a greater understanding of the evil forces that are at work in the world, and why it would be unwise to interact with or summon them in any way.